Welcome back. The federal Liberals' carbon policy climb down is back in the spotlight again as the Senate looks to vote on a bill that would exempt the carbon tax from fuels used in some farming activities. Now, that bill, C-234, has been before Parliament since 2022, clearing the House in March of 2023 with broad opposition party support. But it's making headlines again following the Liberals' recent announcement that they're pausing the carbon price on home heating oil, a change that largely benefits Atlantic Canadians. The move drew swift criticism from the opposition, who say it's a play by the Liberals to curry favor from a voter base where they've had waning support. Meanwhile, the bill is now up for a third reading when the Senate returns this week. It's been through procedural football as senators grapple with possible amendments while others are under intense pressure to reject the bill altogether. MPs are here to debate what should happen. With me today, Liberal MP Ryan Turnbull, Conservative MP and Deputy Leader Melissa Lantsman, and NDP and Natural Resources critic Charlie Angus. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for making the time for this discussion. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Mr. Turnbull, I want to start with you. Why does your government not want C-234 passed? It would save farmers, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, nearly $1 billion by 2030 at a time when we know their costs are extremely high. Why don't you want to help them out?
Well, we do want to help farmers out, and we are helping farmers out. We empathize with the position that they're in, and we know they're on the front lines of fighting climate change. We have to remember, Vasi, that 97% of on-farm GHG emissions are already exempted from the price on pollution. We've recently doubled the rural top-up from 10 to 20%, which the PBO report just recently published says $304 million more dollars distributed to rural families. And we've already done a return to farmers and invested over $1.5 million in alternatives to help farmers adopt renewable energy on farm.
So to follow up though, then what is the big deal about expanding that a further 3% to the 3% of fuels that are not exempt right now, if it will help out farmers in the long run to the tune of nearly $1 billion by 2030?
Well, it erodes the price signal, which we know is, why the price on pollution is so effective at driving the changes that we need in our economy. I don't believe that we need to do that. I think that erodes the signal, which is a clear market signal that helps to change behavior and adopt new technologies and drive innovation, which is the whole point of the price on pollution.
So let me just quickly follow up before I bring in your colleagues and respectfully challenge you. Why was it okay to erode the signal for lifting home heating oil, for providing an exemption there, which does primarily impact Atlantic Canadians, and not for farmers? Is it because they are largely in jurisdictions where there aren't more Liberal MPs?
No, well, we know the temporary pause on the price on pollution on home heating oil applies right across Canada. And it's a temporary measure that is coupled with, again, financing for heat pumps and the doubling of the rural top-up. So, in coordination with these measures, it's helping Canadians with affordability challenges by adopting the new technologies, which is the same thing we're doing with farmers right across the country. So farmers already have a 97% exemption from GHG emissions and have all of the financing and the top-ups and the returns to farmers that they should be able to make the transition, and we've put those in place to really help them make the transition on farm.
Ms. Lantsman, I'll pick this part of the conversation up with you. Two things. First of all, there are alternatives available. Mr. Turnbull does make a point there. Plus, the people in farms or who farm are some of the most affected by the impacts of climate change right now. Why would you want to decrease efforts to mitigate what does affect them so much?
Well, we want to help farmers out, and we want to help them out at the cost of those who grow the food, and by extension, those who buy the food, and in between those who truck the food. What Mr. Turnbull isn't telling viewers today is that this poses an incredible political problem, one that they've already faced with the first carve-out, which you mentioned, where the Prime Minister was polling low and his caucus was revolting. And now they have another political problem. You see, their Environment Minister told Canadians that there would be no more carve-outs. The Prime Minister told Canadians that there would be no more carve-outs. And now we see unprecedented pressure on the Senate, particularly around this bill for carve-outs for farmers that will lower the cost of food, according not only to us, but the experts like the Parliamentary budget officer.
But I have to respectfully challenge you as well, because is your party being disingenuous about the degree to which this actually will help farmers? If 97% of what they, just give me a second, if 97% of what they're using already to heat their barns and heat their greenhouses is already exempt from the carbon tax, which the Liberals did acknowledge there were not alternatives for, so they provided for that exemption, then how earth-shattering will this change actually be? Or are you just talking about it because it's good politics for you too?
Well, look, this bill was passed by the House. It was passed by the House with the support of even the NDP, who believes that. Once in a while, they will vote to give Canadians a break, although they are the ones who continue to raise the carbon tax on families. We have 2 million people, over 2 million people in 1 month using a food bank. So every single thing that Conservatives can do to lower the cost of food, lower the cost of those who grow the food, and lower the cost of those who transport the food, and by extension to those that buy the food, we are going to do that.
Mr. Angus, does your party still support this bill?
I think the fact that we're arguing about a farm fuel that covers only 3%, and we have the Conservatives lighting their hair on fire and the Liberals going to the wall to defend it shows how bad the carbon pricing defense of the Trudeau government is. The fact is, out of the G7, we are the only country that has completely failed. This is what the Environment Commissioner just said this week. Every other country's hit their targets. We're not even close. We are still super high.
Respectfully, though, part of that plan is the price on pollution, which will become most effective when it is at its highest level from an environmental perspective. If your party is so concerned about reaching those targets, why would you have supported, for example, the motion that would expand the exemption of the carbon tax on other sources of home heating?
Well, this is the problem that we have with carbon pricing, the way the Liberals have presented it. I mean, when you're targeting people who have to heat their homes, we've always said as New Democrats, heating your home isn't a luxury.
But they're not trying to target, aren't they trying to disincentivize using things that pollute a lot?
If you're disincentivizing senior citizens who are heating their homes or farmers who are drying grain, you're missing the target. Meanwhile, Suncor has said the urgency of making as much money as they can while the planet's burning in the worst economic catastrophe we've ever seen. The Conservatives don't care. They don't care that the planet's burning. They're scoring political points because they don't have a climate plan. The problem is that the Liberals have botched their plan.
Is this, Mr. Turnbull, your government basically taking this position because it is political, because you don't want the environment minister to quit, for example? And is it arguing over semantics, to Mr. Angus's point, when there's a bigger issue at play?
No, I mean, we see on the one hand, Conservatives have stuck their head in the sand for generations on, climate change and climate action. They don't seem to want to admit that it's real. And then we have the NDP pandering for votes in some of their ridings that seem to want to support an erosion of the price on pollution. Our government is standing strong in firm support of a price on pollution. We know that the market signal works. We know the IMF and the World Bank have cited pollution pricing as the most effective, most cost-effective measure for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And we don't want to see any backsliding on that at all.
Why is the NDP pandering for votes when they're asking for exemptions to the carbon tax, but your government not pandering when you brought in an exemption to the carbon tax for people which your Minister of Rural Economic Development told me on this program are well represented by Liberal MPs?
I think that was in context, in a different context, but from my perspective, what we heard at committee was that there was solutions that had not reached commercial viability for grain drying in Canada. We know that biomass is available, so why would you erode the price signal if people actually have the solutions to integrate on farm? And so we know those solutions are there. They need to be scaled up dramatically, and our government is supporting that side of the equation too, which is making sure that we have the alternatives. I don't know what more we can do, Bessie.
Ms. Lantsman, I want to put part of what Mr. Turnbull put to you, because your party is very politically wedded to the idea of being against the carbon tax. But in this case, if those alternatives do exist, as I detailed, the money has been put aside for them and farmers are able to avail themselves of them, why would the government reduce its efforts to mitigate the impact of climate change, particularly for those people in this country who will be affected by it the most?
Vashi, we've seen the Liberal government carve out in one case for some Canadians in some places and not for others in others. This is inconsistent on both sides right here, with the NDP supporting some and not others, with the Liberals carving out points of their signature legislation or their signature raison d'etre. There is one party, and you're absolutely right about this, there's one party that is going to cut the carbon tax for everyone, everywhere, and forever, and that is the Conservative Party. It is the only one that.
But what happens to climate? But what happens to climate?
I've said this on this show many times, and we've said it in the House. We are going to make greener energy, greener, cleaner, more ethical energy cheaper, while not making traditional energy more expensive. That is the plan. We are going to fight off the regulation that we have seen in this country that has sent the private proponents for tidal power off packing. We are going to bring in faster regulation, frankly, for nuclear. Something that the Environment Minister still can't get behind. Hydroelectric in Quebec, carbon capture and storage out west. It is not about making traditional energy more expensive. It is about making greener, cleaner energy cheaper and more accessible to Canadians, and that is exactly what you're going to see.
Okay, and you're right, Ms. Lantsman. We have talked about that many times on this show, and I have pointed out that there's a lot of broad ideas, but very few details that you've presented. I know you've said that you'll table those much later, but your critics and your other panelists are shaking their heads. Mr. Angus, final question to you. The point that both the NDP and the Conservatives and the Liberals are making is that the way in which you're applying your own philosophy here, the party's philosophy, is inconsistent. So that essentially you say you are critical of the government for not doing enough to reach its climate goals, but you are okay with some exceptions to the plan to get there.
Well, the problem is that we've been trying to get this Liberal government to meet their commitments. I mean, Stephen Guilbeault went to COP26 and said, we'll put an emissions cap. Never heard from that again. We've been seeing continually promises, and those promises are broken. So where is the plan? We keep pushing for a plan. The Liberals don't have one, where they've failed with theirs, and the Conservatives would rather let the planet burn while scoring political points.
Okay, on that very positive point, no, I'm just kidding. I have to end our discussion there. I appreciate all three of you making a lot of time for it, though. Thank you so much, Ryan Turnbull, Melissa Lantsman, and Charlie Angus.